You can think of lobbying as a game of chess. In the grand game of chess, there is a strategy, each piece has a role, and every move is bound by rules. A good lobbyist is like a good chess player. But lobbying is no game. The actions taken by big lobbies shape our reality. In a previous video, I explained how a group of lobbyists led by McDonald's had orchestrated a lobbying blitz against the European Union. They were not happy with the law that the European Union wanted to pass, so they decided to change it. If you haven't done so already, I would recommend watching that video. But in this one, I would like to go beyond the fact that these organizations manipulated the European Union with lobbying to explore the boundaries of its legality. Because the question is, how much lobbying is legal? To be clear, there is no way to prove this, but there are also reasons to believe that some of these lobby organizations are behind the creation of some fake profiles on social media. An example that stands out is the example of Merquiey Jerwallach. For starters, this profile has all the characteristics of a fake profile. No photo, no connections, no background, no nothing. Starting in October 2023, at the height of the lobbying blitz, this profile began posting comments actively, but ceased activity after the vote in late November at the European Parliament. And when I say actively, I mean actively. Jerwallach posted over 100 comments in 2 months, all of them targeting reusable packaging or supporting paper packaging options. His comments were particularly aggressive when paper packaging or McDonald's were criticized, and he relentlessly hammered home the idea that a shift to reusable packaging entailed a dramatic shift towards plastic packaging, the same strategy followed by the paper industry. In fact, it's quite interesting to see the coincidence in the words chosen. Both this profile and the EPA constantly used the expression "a flood of plastics." It also had many similarities in making the same point that the position of single-use paper industry was scientifically sound, supported by consumers, and better for the planet. This comment is particularly interesting because this profile seems to be implicitly admitting that he is part of the European paper industry, talking in their behalf. Once more, this doesn't serve as definitive proof, but the timing and similarity of the messages suggest an association between this fake profile and the industry. On December 2022, following an investigation by the Belgian police, 8 arrests were made across Belgium and Italy.
During a raid conducted on several homes and offices, Belgian authorities reportedly found bags of cash at Kaili's residence.
Allegedly, European Parliament officials, lobbyists and their families had received large sums of money by Qatar and other countries to influence the European Parliament, or in other words, to engage in corruption. That's another whole story, but what is interesting for us is that following this scandal, the European Parliament approved a set of internal rules to avoid similar scandals to happen. These rules contained a set of obligations for European Parliament officials to better monitor lobbying activities, and one of these is particularly important for this story. According to this new rule, meetings with lobbyists could only be with organizations signed up to the Transparency Register, and all meetings had to be publicly disclosed. So the question here is, did the actions of the McCoup comply with the Qatargate rules? According to internal sources, despite these new rules, lobbyists stopped parliamentarians and assistants in the corridors, bars, and as we know, they even hang ads and leaflets against the law at their doors. But again, following the new transparency rules, lobbyists are supposed to ask for an official meeting with European parliamentarians. In this case, clearly, it appears that lobbyists did not follow this rule. They directly approach lawmakers to request a vote against the law and advocate for their interests without requesting and registering an official meeting. This appears to be against the law. Maria Angela Danzi, an Italian parliamentarian, wrote that there was a total lack of security and asked the European Parliament President, Roberta Metsola, to open an investigation. To this day, such an investigation has not been opened. In Europe, lobby organizations are expected to follow the Code of Conduct of the Transparency Register, a register created by the European Commission. However, it appears that organizations involved into this lobbying campaign did not follow the Code of Conduct. For instance, point B of the Transparency Register Code of Conduct says that lobby organizations must declare the interests and objectives they promote, and specify the clients or members whom they represent. I don't think lobbying groups involved in the story have complied with this point. The case of 360 Food Service, the lobby that distributed 1,500 flyers against the law in the European Parliament, is paradigmatic. If you go to this organization's website, you will only see terms such as sustainable, responsible reuse, zero waste, zero litter, etc. But in reality, they represent very polluting companies such as McDonald's and Starbucks, and they go around the corridors of the European Parliament telling officials to roll back regulations to prevent packaging waste. Similarly, if you go to the website of the European Paper Packaging Alliance, another organization involved in the lobbying blitz, you will see highlighted terms such as not-for-profit, sustainability, circularity, and more. In the registry, under the category Goals, the organization simply states to be a non-profit aiming to find concrete solutions to increase recycling and to reduce carbon emissions of food packaging. There is no mention at all of the fact that they exist to represent and advocate for their members' interests, which include big fast food and packaging companies. There is also the EPACA Code of Conduct. This is an internal code developed by a network that represents big public affairs consultancies in Europe. It includes, among others, Bolt, that represents and is paid by McDonald's and Together for Sustainable Packaging, Eamon Bates, that represents Food Service 360, and APCO, that represents the European Paper Packaging Alliance. See, these organizations support lobbyists in their activities, so I think they are also accountable for the manipulative aspects of their actions. They are all members of EPACA, the European Public Affairs Consultancies Association, so they should abide by its code of conduct. But did they? Point F of the EPACA code reads, "Not disseminate false or misleading information knowingly or recklessly, and exercise proper care to avoid doing so inadvertently." Yet, these organizations promoted misleading studies, calling them independent studies even though they had been paid by companies with a vested interest. These studies were criticized by almost 60 scientists for their lack of transparency and their manipulation of data to reach the desired results. Finally, point K, referring to the relationship with public officials, says, "Neither propose nor undertake any action which would constitute an improper influence on them," which, by the way, is also a point under the Transparency Register Code of Conduct. Yet, we already saw how lobbyists stopped parliament officials in the corridors, bars, and even went directly to their door to leave documents and make pressure. So I think there's a strong argument to be made that that's an improper influence on them. In a discussion about the legality and ethics of lobbying, another aspect that we have to cover is media outlets. Let's take the example of POLITICO. See, POLITICO is a respected source of information in the EU bubble. Their daily newsletter on European politics has 125,000 subscribers, many of them influential people at the heart of European institutions. And here's the thing, POLITICO has systematically accepted sponsorships from the companies involved in this lobbying campaign, helping them to disseminate misinformation. For instance, POLITICO published 2 articles written by McDonald's against the law. But this is not only about a couple of articles. For weeks before the final vote in the European Parliament, you had a sponsored comment by McDonald's or Together for Sustainable Packaging in the POLITICO daily newsletter. To be clear, the problem here is not that they accepted a sponsorship by a private company, but the fact that they accepted a sponsorship containing misleading information that aimed to confuse the readers. For instance, it is shocking to me that in these articles and newsletters, McDonald's insisted on calling independent report, independent research, or Kearney study a report that they had paid for and that was prepared based on data provided by McDonald's. Given the audience of these newsletters and articles, it is quite problematic that Politico gives free hand to sponsors to include whatever they want into this content. All this, by the way, happened even after 60 experts wrote a letter calling out these misleading reports. So there is a case to be made that Politico should have verified the content of the sponsors' claims. In the grand game of lobbying, strategy and precision are essential, but just like in a game of chess, there must be rules. The actions of McDonald's and other lobbying groups have raised important questions about the morality, but also the legality of their actions. The McCoup campaign shows the need for rules, transparency, and accountability in the lobbying industry. Because see, many companies engage in rather aggressive lobbying against this law. Coca-Cola, Danone, Nestlé, PepsiCo, Unilever, you name it. They all acted either directly or through business federations. But they used common and more acceptable lobby techniques, such as sending letters, making publications, or openly criticizing certain decisions. In other words, they met the minimum standards of transparency and honesty. This story also shows that newspapers should verify the claims made by sponsors, because we need newspapers that provide accurate information, no matter how much the sponsor will pay. We have to remember that the impact of these actions is real. These lobbying campaigns have consequences that shape our reality. So remember, in the world of lobbying, much like in chess, rules matter.